So welcome to the xAPI profile primer. We're going to review the current version of the document. It's version 2-10. First I want to introduce Team xAPI profiles. This is from the fall 2021 xAPI cohort. Laurel, Shatan, Judy, Henry, Julian Davis, Peter Hawkins, and myself were regular meeting members. We were also joined by Jason Haig and Duncan Wilder for some feedback and review of the materials. Julian and Peter are from Team Down Under, and Shatan is from India, so we want to give them special thanks for joining us across time zones. So the agenda for the presentation was to do a walkthrough of the primer. We have some slides with images and then demos that we had done for the xAPI party. I'm just going to summarize this today, and then we'll go into the primer itself. We also want to provide a link to the GitHub for the PDF. The latest version has been uploaded up there. And then additional slides include comparing the common reference profile and profile server, looking at the human readable template. We're not really going to focus on that today. And then we have a reference list for the xAPI profiles. So the primer starts off with this opening page with the title page and the authors from like I mentioned, the fall 2021 xAPI cohort. We launched as Team xAPI profile and wanted to build this document to give people a jump start, if you will, on getting started with profiles. We by the end of the cohort, we were able to publish and present version 1-07. We're on version 2-10, so we've got some updates to talk through today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the document rather than trying to read through the table of contents here. I don't know why things just skittered around, but we'll jump back to this. And then we should be able to see things from here a little better. So again, we're in version 2-10. We'll jump into the table of contents. This has changed quite a bit. We restructured and added a new section or two. How to use, how to build, and then when to use a profile is the primary section. But then when to build a new profile, we elaborated some details there. And the opening section of the documents hasn't changed too much. There's been some updates to URLs in there, but it's been enough to where we want to let people know that things are updated. Keeping the revision history in check. So we've added in, we did some updates prior to reviewing this document with IEEE xAPI Profiles Workgroup. This video should serve as that review in case we're not able to do it live. We ran into a quorum issue with the scheduled presentation date, so I'm just going to go ahead and record this and let people see it outside of the meeting if that is the need. Version 209, we added some content. I mentioned renumbering the sections, and of course I rebuilt the table of contents. Since it's a Word doc, anytime you move things around, you need to rebuild that. And then 2.10 or 2-10, however you want to hear it. We added in some graphics to summarize the Navy and NETG material, and we'll get to that in section 2, I believe. The other thing to point out here on the right, we dive into the document content. There's an overview. I give people direction on how to locate and download the document and how to read the document. So there's some other information in here. It looks like I'm jumping around, so let me do this another way. And then there's some references, vocabulary profiles, and the tin can register. So we're going to go into section 1.2. The tin can registry, there's a URL, but that is still floating around. But that information has been declared as out of date by the ADL, and we're being told to use the xAPI profile server. 1.2.2, the ADL xAPI vocabulary server is also out of date, no longer recommended. They're recommending people look at the profile server. The reason being is those systems are still online, but they're not necessarily maintained, and they have some content that has gotten out of date and was not pulled forward into the profile server. So section 1.2.3 ADL profile server is now the recommended source. There are some challenges there, as an earlier published link is no longer valid as of June 2022. So you want to look at this 2022 recommended link. Profiles.adlnet.gov is the current link. You may have this earlier version that is usalearning.net that is broken and outdated, and I believe last time I checked, I should say, it did not have a forwarder set up, so it did not give you any explanation or warning. It just gave you a 404 that site could not be found. On the adlnet.gov, there is a user guide and an authoring guide. Those guides, in my opinion, are aimed primarily at authors of profiles, and even though the user guide is named that, it really is a user guide for the site for someone who is authoring a profile. Again, the authoring guide clearly is for authors, but the challenge is that the user guide is really for someone using the site to author a profile, so they're not really user-level documents. That is one of the primary reasons the document you're looking at here, the xAPI primer, was created, was because those guides are sort of focused for the authoring side rather than the consumption side. So just continuing on with this section 1.2.4, Torrance Learning's profile flattener is their, in a sense, their interpretation of the profile server. It links to the newly updated profiles.adlnet.gov and pulls content from there, but it actually elaborates some of the profiles. If I recall correctly, it was the video profile that was primarily elaborated on the Torrance Learning site, and then there may be a second one. So you should probably explore that site as well before you dive in. Now in section 2, we actually get into some details of our recommendations. Again, this was not a single author. It was not just me, even though I'm presenting it here. There was a group of us that came up with the mindset of how to use a profile, when to use a profile, and some of these other topics that we're going to go through. So the when to use a profile really gets the perspective of someone who is starting xAPI from the beginning. They may want to learn to write a statement. There's not really a need for that level. But once you start trying to implement xAPI for an organization and you're looking at types of learning content, ideally you'd want to align each type of learning content you're supporting with a xAPI profile. And the most basic connection I can make is if you're presenting video content, you want to look at that video profile for all the actions, verbs, and objects, all the content type that they recommend for use with that kind of media. And then the other thing to realize is that it's not a one-stop shop. There's a number of places you can go for information, and we're recommending some of these other resources. So our recommendation is from left to right. If you're going to take a look at the information that you see on the Navy implementation guidelines, there's some content there that we will elaborate in a moment. I'm realizing I didn't summarize that content here, so it's a little difficult to talk to it, but we'll get there in a moment. The next step would be to take a look at the common reference profile. You can see that I'm in the PDF, and these documents have links. That's why the mouse keeps changing based on what I'm hovering over. But the common reference profile is also a good source to look at. Then we recommend you review the general reference profiles. There's a number of them listed here. CMI5, the DoD ISD profile, and the TLA profile are the three high-level ones that serve as valuable reference. If you're simply looking to replace SCORM, CMI5 is your place to really focus. If you're looking to go into a learning ecosystem, the TLA is the one-stop shop for that. Next, we would recommend that you review profiles for specific modalities or specific types of content. I mentioned video, audio, AR, VR, XR are sort of grouped into one. You may want to look at content around serious games, social media, performance support, and the visual patient. Those have all been elaborated as specific types of media having a custom profile created for them. And then, as you progress through that, if you're still looking at something that is extremely customized and has a highly detailed vocabulary beyond what others you find, you might want to review new and emerging profiles. And then the next step would be to decide whether or not you can adapt the existing ones to your needs, or in section 3 we'll see how to create your own profile. So that would be the follow-on movement beyond all this, is if you still need something customized, you should move beyond that. So this is where we elaborate the reviewing the Navy xAPI implementation guidelines. And there's some text in the upper left, but what you see on the other quadrants are part of a document that I created where I'm summarizing the content. So this graphic in the lower left, the xAPI statement data model, has been used to talk about the actions, verbs, objects, the result, the context, and the timestamp. So there's a number of components to a statement, and you as an author have the ability to decide some of what is included. The actor, verb, object sections are requirements, but you can add in content to the context, for example, or the result, for example. And one of the unique parts is the timestamp. If you don't create that on the authoring side or as part of a learning record provider, when your statements are sent to the LRS will recognize that timestamps have not been added on the creation side, and it will add them on the receipt side, meaning you will get a timestamp added as to when the statement was received by the LRS, and the difference between those should be in milliseconds. It should be very minimal. So that is a completely acceptable way of timestamping the information to near real time, I should say. And then what I have over here on the right is I've elaborated out the section headings from the implementation guidelines to where the actor is described in 2.1, the requirements are 2.1.1.1, and then the actor name, object type, account homepage, and account name are all elaborated under that requirements section. And then we'd move on to verbs, and requirements for the verbs include the verb ID, the verb display, and the language map. So each of those are requirements, and they're all elaborated in that. So from this view, you can see what the implementation, or part of what the implementation guidelines provide. Again, moving on to the next screen, you're going to see us elaborate the object, result, context, and timestamp sections. So the object is this rather confounding one over here. The context is over here, and then we get into the timestamps and those requirements. So you can see there's quite a bit of detail summarized from that document, and that is why we recommend reviewing that document as a first step, as it can really help you get some of the requirements out of the way. Next, we would recommend you review the Navy Common Reference Profile. This is another document published by, again, the Navy or NETC, and it is located on their site at usalearning.net and available for download from that common content page. There is a number of things found within this document, so it includes information on links, on likes and dislike buttons, and audio and video. So there's content within the common reference profile. There are example statements, there are requirements around what would be included, what should be documented, and what the options are. So there's a great deal of information already published that can be used as a starting point, and that's really the value that reviewing these documents will have for you. Next on, we mentioned 2.3. the top of the right, we mentioned some of the general xAPI profiles. Again, this includes CMI5, the DoD instructional design profile, which is quite elaborate with 425 concepts. And then the other thing to notice is the TLA profile includes statement templates, patterns, and concepts. So it is, the TLA profile itself is actually one of the exemplar profiles on the ADL's xAPI profile server, in that the TLA profile has been elaborated with all this additional content. So it serves as a strong starting point for you to explore that profile server. And again, that is what we're recommending. You search the profile server, and we provide the URL here so you can click to move out to that. Next in the process, we would recommend that you look at specific modalities. If you're working above and beyond CMI5, ISD, or TLA, you may have need for some of these additional content types. Video, audio are elaborated earlier on, but there are also projects that are being documented and have been elaborated with their own profile that you should review. And the other one that's emerging is AR, VR, XR, or emerging reality kind of training. Each of those profiles, I shouldn't say each of those, I believe at this point they're combined into one. But as things progress, those individual profiles may also develop, so you may need to search the site for each of them as well as a combined profile to review. Serious games, social media, performance support, and virtual patients all have an individual profile that has been created for them. So if your content lines up in one of those structures, especially gamification for serious games, you should definitely take the time to recommend those, or excuse me, we recommend you take the time to review those modalities. And then finally in section 2.5, we talk about reviewing any new and emerging. Of course, this document and this video are literally out of date the moment we publish it. We're not able to absolutely review every profile on the profile server, so there may be something out there this moment that was not out last time we looked at it and reviewed the content to make the recommendations. So you should perform your own search and see what else you can find on the profile server, as well as the Torrance Learning profile flattener. The next section, we talk about when to build a new profile. You want to define your custom vocabulary. You want to publish a new profile to the profile server. This also is, as I mentioned earlier, is a subject of the authoring guide and the user guide. If you're looking at how to publish a profile for others to review and contribute, you want to review those two documents. And then how to select, we've already gone through the how to select part, but as you go through building it, you really should be looking at how to select and use profile vocabulary items, individual items, so such as actions, verbs, and objects from other profiles should be reused if possible. So if you have one that's success or completion or something like that that's very general, there's a good chance that one of the other profiles has that. So you want to take the time to look at those definitions and the references and make sure you're using it consistently, and then reuse it if possible rather than adding your own vocabulary to the server. The other thing to know is the profile server has a link for each of the profiles where you can individually export their content to a JSON LD document. That can be copied and pasted in either into a code editor or into a web-based form where it can be validated, and you can, once you validate it, which you should do when you copy and paste from a web-based form, once you validate it, you can use that as a starting point for your own code. And then finally, how to use a profile is just a brief discussion of how to start to build this and elaborate on your own use. Yep. Sorry about that. Got a call coming in. So that's really the end of the document and where we're at today, mid-June of 2022. You can see that this document has been revised and updated, so check back to the GitHub, check in with the IEEE Profiles Working Group, which is one of the groups I'm belonging to and presenting this document to. But check in with us there and let me know if you have changes or want to see some other content that's elaborated on it. Thanks for your time.